All right, note the equation at the top of the screen on the left. You have x squared minus 7x equals 0. So let's discuss this type of equation. First of all, let me rewrite it. You have x squared minus 7x equals 0. First thing you notice is that there's a square there. So let's contrast that with an equation where the power is 1, as in x minus 7 equals 0. In this case, you simply add 7 to both sides, and you wind up with x equals 7. Now, this is on the left, back to the quadratic. This is a very, very different type of problem. First of all, if the power is 1, then there's one solution. If the power is 2, as on the left here, then there will be 2 solutions. If the highest power was a 3, then there'd be 3 solutions, etc. Okay, so let's take a look at this problem on the left again and see, well, then if it is not a linear equation that has a highest power of 1, then what is this equation? Well, we call any equation where the highest power is a 2 or a square, we call these quadratic equations. And there's a special method to solve quadratics. You cannot transpose as we did on the right over here. You have to use a new method, and the method is called the zero product. Or you know what, they call it, sorry, some books call it zero product. It's the zero factor property, and once you know that, you'll be able to solve this kind of equation. All right, there's a couple of things I need to make a note before we continue. Note that if you have 3 over 0, the answer is undefined. All right, you can't divide by 0 because there is no answer that will bring you back to 3. So in general, dividing by 0 is considered undefined. Okay, what else? Some people like to call it, instead of the zero factor property, they like to call it solving by factoring. Okay, so let's describe what the zero factor property tells you. In general, if you have a times b equals 0, this means that a can equal 0 or b can equal 0, or both. So if I make a 0, so that's 0 times b, that's still 0. That's true, right? That's very true. Or we can have a times 0, which is 0, and that is still true. But now a or b, or both, I'll put here, or both can be 0. So if you have a product equal to 0, it's very easy to solve for a or for b. So in this case, a was 0 or b was 0. Well, suppose I give you x times x, I don't know, plus 5 equals 0. Well, using the zero product property, or the zero factor property, sorry, you will get first factor is x equals 0, or second factor is x plus 5 equals 0. And now you want to solve for x. That's your goal. And here we get x equals 0 or x equals negative 5. Well, let's go back to our original problem, which was, I already forgot, x squared minus 7x. X squared minus 7x equals 0. What's the problem here? Well, you don't have a product as you do in this example above. Well, how do you make it a product? Well, you make a polynomial a product by factoring. So I'm going to factor out the x, and now I can solve the problem using the zero factor property. So I get x equals 0, or x minus 7 equals 0, and then of course x is 0, or x equals 7. All right, I want to make a very, very important note at this point. The reason why we have to use the zero factor property instead of dividing by x is for this reason. If I give you the problem again, let me do it in a different color. Suppose you have x squared minus 7x equals 0. All right, this is a mistake. This is a common It's a common error. Some students say, well, why can't I just divide by x? And guess what? X turned out to be 0. You can't divide by 0, as I stated above. I said division by 0 is undefined. So for that reason, you should never ever divide by an x term. And the second reason is, I mean, even if you did this, x minus 7 equals 0, you only wind up with one solution, when from the very beginning we said that when the highest power is 2, you must have 2 solutions. So the reason why division by x is incorrect is for 2 reasons. One, you can't divide by 0. And secondly, you lose one of your solutions. So never, ever divide by an x term. All right, let's look at our note here. It says x squared equals 7x. Well, you see a square, which means that we should use, in this case, the 0 factor property. But the problem is, it's not set equal to 0. You need a product equal to 0. And we don't have that. But we can transpose the 7x over to the other side, and you get x squared minus 7x equals 0, and then proceed to the above by solving the problem by factoring and winding up with your 2 solutions. I'd like to give you a couple of more examples. So let's take a look at x squared minus 9 equals 0. Okay, at example 1, examine the problem. Do you have a square, and is the polynomial on the left equal to 0? The answer is yes to both. Next example, is the highest power a square? Yes. And is the polynomial on the left equal to 0? Yes. You are good to go for the 0 factor property. Okay. So what do you do? Well, at this point, the method that we're using is the factoring method. So I'm just going to factor, and I wind up with x plus 3 times x minus 3. And then you set each factor equal to 0, and it's one or the other. And you wind up with x equals negative 3 or x equals 3. So there are your 2 solutions. In the next example, again, we're going to factor the polynomial on the left, and we wind up with x minus 5 times x plus 3. Be careful with your signs. And you wind up with x minus 5 equals 0 or x plus 3 equals 0. Your 2 solutions are x equals 5 or x equals negative 3, and you solve these 2 simple equations. All right, please find 3 examples for you to practice on. I would pause the video and try them, and then come back and look for the solutions. Problem number 1. Since we have a square and as the highest power on the left and set equal to 0, we can use the 0 factor property, and I'm going to do that by factoring. I'm going to factor out the GCF, which in this case is 2x, and I'm left with 2x minus 1 equals 0. Set each factor equal to 0. I get 2x equals 0 or 2x minus 1 equals 0. Divide by 2, and of course x is 0 on the left, or I get 2x equals 1, divide by 2, x equals 1/2, and those are your 2 solutions. All right, next problem. Yes, this is a quadratic. The highest power is 2. In the polynomial on the left, and the equation is set, the left side is set equal to 0. Again, we're going to factor. This is the difference of 2 squares. So this is 2x and 2x minus 3 plus 3. Just FOIL back to double check that you are correct. We get each factor is set equal to 0 by the 0 factor property. 2x plus 3 equals 0. So you get 2x equals 3 x equals 3 over 2, or same thing we do here, x equals negative 3, and x equals negative 3 over 2. And there are your solutions. In the next example, again, we have a quadratic. The polynomial on the left, the highest power is 2, and the polynomial on the left is set equal to 0. If it wasn't, you would have transposed the terms over to create this trinomial. All right, I'm going to factor. This is 2x and x. Let's see, we want to get to a 5, so that's 3, that's 6, and 1. That should be minus, and that should be plus. Let's double check. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 3 is negative 6. Plus 1x is negative 5x, and a positive 1 times a negative 3 is negative 3. You get 2x plus 1 equals 0, or the other factor is x minus 3, set it equal to 0. Here you get x equals negative 1/2, or x equals 3. All right. If you want to check, you take your solutions, plug them back into the original to determine whether you get a true statement.